July, and here we are in high summer for the next 2 months, as far as the garden is concerned at least, though the weather still has us guessing. Hot one day, wet and cold the next. But the garden is loving it. Plenty of moisture, so that all growth this year is mammoth, even above the usual extra size growth we get for having such damp woodland ground. In the upper garden, things are seriously starting to jump too, popping with colour and filling out nicely. Hot weather, hot colours. Starting with our rose and clematis arches, they are continuing to develop, and the plants are gradually getting their feet down and becoming more vigorous. We cannot fertilise them or enrich their soil as they are next to wild grassy areas, and that would distort the growth there, so they make their own way as best they can, which means they have taken longer to really settle in than in other areas of the garden they might have done. Plus they have survived through some extremely overheated summer spells in previous years and made it with minimal support, so they will be tough and hardy. A couple continue to struggle slightly, and we've had to replace one rose and one clematis, but overall not too bad given the challenges. The late flowering clematis, in pinks and purples and creams, whose names I have all but forgotten, are making gently draping curtains on each arch, and most of the roses are starting to put on a decent show too now. The long grass on either side is once more full of horsetails, even though they were all completely pulled a month ago. They grow back so enthusiastically once you pull them out, but amongst them have grown a marsh thistle which is seriously tall too, considerably taller than me at 5 foot 8 inches, and a favourite of goldfinches, especially at seed time. Also, the Scotch thistles are seeding themselves around too. We are starting to see more insects on these two plants as summer progresses, and sincerely hope that many more will start to arrive. We also have the ragworts, which are left to attract cinnabar moths, which I had in plenty in my last garden a few miles away, but here not yet a single sighting of one cinnabar caterpillar. In the top borders and terrace there are plenty of hot colours starting to show their true colours, though this really kicks off in August, but for now we have the vivid Crocosmia Red King next to the more golden yellow Crocosmia George Davison, intermingling with vividly dark red coloured Canna tropicana leaves and some spikes of blue Russian sage or Perovskia to cool it all down slightly. We also have many waving baubles of Verbena bonariensis still going strong and filling in above the heads of many other plants. This really has been such a winning plant for all garden lovers. Alstromera Indian Summer adds to the general heat of summer colours, and the cool blue-greens of Milianthus leaves next to it add to the big leaf tropical feel, while simultaneously providing contrast. This too will produce its deep red flowers by the end of summer. Elsewhere the dahlias are starting to come into flower, though August is really their true time. This lovely creamy yellow water lily type I put into a terrace steps pot, and next to it in the border a deep reddish black of a pom-pom dahlia which was planted out last year into the direct garden and not dug up at the end of the summer. It has come through a very wet winter because this part of the garden is rather dry in summer and well drained. These are covered in black fly at the moment, but I hope they will be cleaned up soon enough by an aphid predator. We have enough around in the form of various birds and a few insects which have now arrived. Speaking of insects, we must show you the few photos we have managed to get of some of our dragonflies, the very elusive but utterly charming dark male beautiful demoiselles, which rarely stay still long enough to capture. I think from its size this one is probably the lovely ruddy red darter, and finally probably the common blue damselfly. We also have southern hawkers, but they are even faster and rarely rest long enough to take a shot of with the iPad. We will continue to try as summer progresses, as they are around until the end of October usually. The pond was declared not a pond because there are too many water lilies on it to be a pond by our 6-year-old grandson, but it proves that once again the pond is the centre of wildlife in any garden. We often see birds and insects drinking from their place of safety in stone in the shallows or perched on one of the lily leaf pads. The butterfly population is also on the increase. I've seen several gatekeepers and meadow browns, a single marbled white, all of which are grass feeders and breeders. Then there is this lovely tree nectar feeding speckled wood we managed to catch on camera. Then we come to our greens bed, our summer and winter cabbages, otherwise known as spring greens or collards. They are currently heading up into nice pointed summer cabbages, which are delicious shredded and stir-fried with mash and sausages, More of a winter's meal, I agree, but on a wet day in the summer just as lovely and delicious. But with the shortage of winged beings, we have donated 2 of them to the cabbage Wights, who have turned them into intricate lace pattern skeletons. And here are the culprits. The plants will survive and will re-sprout when these chaps have completed their cycles, we hope. Recent additions to the gardens are a couple of buddleias, this their first year of flowering, and otherwise known as butterfly bushes. Another favourite with the butterflies is hardy geranium rosanna, which will also flower from now until the frost cuts them back. It can do this because unlike the Pratense varieties, it does not produce seed. Our next stop is into the woods once more, and here it is really developing into a colourful hydrangea dell. There are 1 or 2 more to get established here, but this is their time. That we have all shades of pink, pale shell shades, deep pink, almost magenta. Then we have the whites, and some slight shades of lilacs creep in where I have tried to convert to blue with aluminium, but with limited success. I think it all washes away with so much endless water running through this area of the garden. Each flower is a lovely, cloudy pillow of soft colour, but mostly they are sterile, except the lace caps, whose small pinpoint flowers do offer nectar. But they are so luxurious that I cannot exclude them from such a hydrangea-friendly habitat. They make the woodland at this time of year. The other astonishing plant is the inula, which arrived here a couple of years ago, when we started to let it all go a little to see what would germinate. So we got a few thugs to contend with, but this is worth it. They have bright yellow daisy flowers and huge dock-like leaves. I am seriously in awe of them. It grows normally up to 6 feet or thereabouts, but ours are towering above me. They must be 10 feet. They love the same shaded, sunny, damp ground they are in, and they are great for all wildlife, birds, insects, butterflies, the lot. I'm hoping they will seed themselves around as much as possible this next year. They are awesome, as you can see from the look on my face. The Blacknam fern is still wandering around slightly, coming up next to where it was last year and dying back elsewhere, but generally expanding its domain. It is still sending up these amazing copper-coloured croziers which open into these wonderful structural fronds. I almost want to redesign this little patch of garden just for this fern. I mean, isn't it spectacular? And if it wants to expand somewhat, who am I to restrict it? We have 1 or 2 anomalies down here, like witch hazel pallida in flower when it should only flower in January or February. But it has switched from hot to cold so many times this year that the plants are confused. Another example of climate issues affecting life generally. Climate season confusion is something I think we will see more often. I must mindfully remember I cannot fix this issue alone, but I can help towards the solution in many small ways. For now I am simply observing and trying to work with it. I do hope it can flower again next winter though. The trouble is they get exhausted and don't have the energy to reflower, so those animals which depend on them in season are left without their reliable sources. Down here the regerzia are still in flower with their lovely pleated leaves and rusty pink flower spikes, again loving the ongoing moisture this year. And finally, our honeysuckle has started to flower. Hopefully it will cover this alder stump alongside the variegated ivy we have here. Another tree that I must mention, though it is more in the upper garden, is our Magnolia grandiflora, which is so full of its huge white waxy blooms that come on and off all year, but are putting on a good show right now. And finally, an overshot of the woodland garden with all its colours and lush greens, when you can view it like this and ignore the weeds.